Hi, I'm Dr. Thad Deal, and on this video today, I want to share with you more information about our autoimmune recovery program and how we're able to help manage and support people who suffer from a variety of autoimmune conditions, including Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, type 1 diabetes, and really just about any autoimmune condition. There's nearly 100 named conditions, and while the individual tissues being targeted and attacked are different, some of the underlying triggers and causative factors remain the same, the mechanism, and that's what we're going to look at today, and that's how we address this. But in order to understand your autoimmune condition, I want to give you a brief explanation of how your immune system works. Your immune system is designed to protect us from foreign invaders, things like bacteria, viruses, parasites. These are the obvious things, but also include things like yeast, molds can be a big problem, an irritant to your immune system, but also things like foods, sensitivities or allergies can trigger an immune response. And ever increasing today is our exposure to environmental toxins. Nearly 80,000 chemicals have been introduced since World War II, and they're having a great impact on our health and the expression and increased incidence of autoimmune conditions. So toxins, including things like heavy metals, particularly mercury from some immunizations and dentistry. There are other sources of mercury as well, but this can also be seen as a foreign invader to our body. Collectively, these things are referred to as antigens. We'll just call them foreign invaders. But what happens when your immune system, or a white blood cell, a special type of white blood cell within your immune system, recognizes one of these antigens? It makes something called an antigen presenting cell. Now this is akin to if you or I were to spot a fugitive from the law or somebody on America's Most Wanted list, we'd get on our cell phone and make a call to the police. This antigen presenting cell is us on our cell phone, calls the 911 center of the immune system, which is your T helper cell. So the antigen presenting cell calls out to your immune system. Your immune system uses signaling chemicals called cytokines. In this case, the cytokine involved is called interleukin 1. So the antigen presenting cell calls out to the 911 control center, which makes a call to the local police or your T cells, and it makes a call to the FBI or your B cells. The T cells is the army that attack and clean up afterwards, whereas your B cells make antibodies. They tag things for attack and destruction and prepare for future exposure to the antigen. This is called your Th1 system, or T helper 1, and this is called your Th2 system. Now, ideally, once the antigen has been removed, something called T suppressor cells come in and calm down this reaction, because these cytokines, these signaling molecules that call out to Th1 and Th2, there's different cytokines that call out to Th1 and different cytokines that call out to Th2. These cytokines and this process by its nature is inflammatory. So once the antigen has been removed, we want to decrease the inflammation. But when things go wrong and there's persistent or repeated exposure to the antigen, this fire begins to burn out of control. And when it does, a third arm of your immune system recently identified can be triggered, your Th17 system. One of the cytokines involved in signaling out to your Th17 system is interleukin 17. Interleukin 17 is highly inflammatory, and it's been demonstrated to stimulate at least a dozen pro-inflammatory mediators. So what happens here is it's like throwing gas on the fire, and the Th17 stimulation and the Th17 pathway is associated with a lot of tissue destruction and the perpetuation or the triggering or the onset of autoimmunity. There's things naturally that we can do to help downregulate this Th17 expression. But also we need to look at Th1 and Th2, because ideally there should be some balance between the two. So a healthy response, the Th1 and Th2 systems should be in relative balance with each other. What happens in an autoimmune situation is that your immune system can become skewed, and you may become either Th1 or Th2 dominant. It's important to find out what your pattern looks like, because there are certain vitamins, nutrients, botanicals that will either stimulate Th1 or Th2. And that's why even taking healthy supplements may be inappropriate for you if you do not understand and appreciate how your immune system has become out of balance and what we need to do to bring it back into balance. And this explains why some people react unfavorably to a number of different supplementation. In contrast to the medical approach, which is to come in here with powerful anti-inflammatories, corticosteroids that decrease the inflammation, and powerful immune suppressors that predispose you or increase your likelihood of developing cancers and other certain lethal infections. We want to help balance, support, and regulate your immune system. Not only do we want to help put the fire out, and there's ways in which we can do this naturally through diet and through supplementation, but we need to figure out what caused the fire in the first place. In other words, go back here and identify and remove the triggers. It doesn't make any sense to put out the fire unless we figured out what is causing it to burn. You need three things to develop an autoimmune condition. The first is genes. Some of us have a genetic predisposition to developing certain conditions or certain health problems. However, genes respond to and are turned on by triggers within our environment. That's the second requirement for developing an autoimmune condition. And this is really probably the biggest reason why we've seen the drastic increase in incidence in autoimmune conditions, nearly tripling over the last several decades, and now represent the third leading cause of mortality and morbidity in industrialized countries. And they affect more women than breast cancer and heart disease combined is toxins within our environment. These genes are being turned on at a much higher rate. So there's things that we can and must do to limit our exposure to toxins within our environment, but to completely shield ourselves from this is impossible. However, there are things that we can do to help support our body's ability to handle toxins, to detoxify. Oftentimes people with autoimmune conditions, chronic pain, and other health problems are poor detoxifiers. So those are things that we can recognize and address. Other triggers that can be stress, insomnia, even recent research points to cooking meats at too high a temperature can change the protein structure and initiate or become an autoimmune or immune system trigger. The third thing we need to develop an autoimmune problem is a leaky barrier system. Our barrier systems are designed to allow certain things in and keep certain things out. The most obvious example is our skin. And if we get a cut in our skin and bacteria gets in there, it can become infected and cause inflammation and problems throughout the body. However, we also have a gastrointestinal barrier system that, due to a wide variety of circumstances, most people have bad guts, whether due to antibiotic overuse, the standard American diet, stress levels, alcohol, certain medications, but they cause a compromised or leaky barrier system, something called leaky gut syndrome. And this allows the immune system and the inflammatory response to be stimulated. Now there is testing that allows us to actually measure the integrity of the gastrointestinal barrier system and to determine, first of all, whether or not it has been compromised, how it's been compromised, and what we need to do to fix it. We need to identify those triggers that are causing continued damage. So we need to look for these things. We can do a stool ecology profile where we use DNA analysis. It's kind of like CSI for your stool, in which we identify what's living in your gut, because you should have beneficial bacteria or probiotics there, and we need to determine whether or not they're there and if we need to replace them. But also we want to find out if there's anything living there that shouldn't be, so underlying bacteria, parasites, yeast that could be triggering this autoimmune reaction and causing it to burn out of control. We need to look at foods. This is a big one, particularly large dietary proteins like gluten, casein, soy, yeast, eggs. Really anything you eat could be a possible trigger, and if what you're having for breakfast every morning is causing your immune system to target, attack, and destroy your body, it's very important that we identify these things and remove them from your diet. And even if you've been tested for gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, the serum traditional testing done has a high, notoriously high, false negative. We now offer some of the most advanced, accurate, and sensitive gluten testing that allows us to truly identify people who are reacting to this protein found in wheat and some other grains. And then we can provide you with very specific diet recommendations. We also need to find out whether or not you have a problem with heavy metals, and there's different ways which we can check for this. And if we find that you have a problem with metals, there's things that we can do to help remove them. We can look at your body's response to stress through something called an adrenal stress index. Our adrenal glands are our stress organs, and in addition to playing an influence on blood sugar regulation, they influence thyroid metabolism, they play a role or control our circadian rhythm or our diurnal cycle. So if you have problems sleeping, if you have problems with low energy, it's essential that we check your adrenal glands with that adrenal stress index. Then based off all this testing that we do, we want to remove the triggers, so get rid of the things that are causing inflammation. We need to repair your intestinal barrier system, and there's research that shows that the autoimmune process can be arrested or stopped if this interplay between genes and the environment is prevented by reestablishing the barrier system. So we can actually turn down or stop that autoimmune process by removing the triggers and repairing your barrier system. There's also specific things we can do to help support and modulate your immune system and decrease inflammation. So not only do we want to put out the fire, we want to rebuild the house. And in order to do that, we need to do all the testing, which hasn't been done up until this point. And again, address you through diet, lifestyle, including quality sleep, quality exercise, and quality stress reduction. And then, if appropriate, neurologically based therapies or rehabilitation. To discover more about our unique approach to supporting and managing people with autoimmune conditions, I invite you to call our office to schedule an initial case review, metabolic assessment, and functional neurological evaluation to determine whether or not you would qualify for one of our programs. And really, what we're talking about is adding quality to your life. So I look forward to hearing from you and finding out whether or not we're going to be able to help you.